Hello and welcome to this Where in the World is Joe Oberly edition of the Purple Journal podcast. I am your host, Joe Johnson, here with Joe Oberly, who was out last week, as we pointed out probably 15 times.
I'm just happy you survived.
I asked that question to myself many times, Joe. Where the hell is Joe Oberly? But, can't always answer it.
It's a philosophical question. Yeah, it's a philosophical question, I guess.
I think my microwave was hacked, and the question spied. So yeah. I survived, and I know nothing about the Russians. Thank you very much.
Did you guys see that someone was posting a picture of like a microwave, and it said like defrost? There's like a defrost button, popcorn, and then a button that just said espionage.
I saw that.
It was freaking sweet.
I saw it was like an open microwave, and there was just in the corner this little tiny picture of like Obama with a camera like peeking out.
What a world we live in. And yeah, what was that?
I say it's classic. You can't make that stuff up.
Oh God, it's weird times. I should mention too that Joe obviously writes for purplePTSD.com and thesportspost.com. So yeah, there's that. And then we also have Mr. Luke Braun, who is also a senior writer. I change his title on a weekly basis of purplePTSD.com and the host of the Infinite Monkeys podcast.
There was a new one this week.
I saw that, man. We should. I forgot to put that in the agenda, but I was meaning to. So we'll talk about that too. But how you doing? How you?
Doing good. It immediately got to sweltering degrees of hot again in the San Fernando Valley where I live. It's been over the last 2 days, yeah. So we're back to that, and we're going to be there for the next 6 months.
How
we're freezing our tailbones off up here.
Yeah, I'll split the difference with you.
God,
yeah,
no
man,
kidding.
We got a ton of snow. I don't know. I think there's something to the fact that like when there's a warm up and then it gets cold again, like your body just can't handle it. It was like 8 degrees the other day, and I literally like curled in a fetal position outside because it felt just like so cold to me. But you know, you win some, you lose some anyway. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's been a ton of news this past week since we did our show last Saturday. Free agency started on Thursday. It's been, as the free agency period can be, it's been pretty crazy. Lots of news, lots of swinging and missing, it seems, from the Vikings. But yeah, I wanted to get your guys' opinions, I guess, on what your thoughts are. It seems like a lot of people are interpreting the moves the Vikings are making or trying to make pretty negatively. So I wasn't sure if you guys agreed with that.
I guess. Well, go ahead.
No, you go first.
All right. I guess, I think everybody that follows the Vikings and, even us who write about them and get excited for the agency period. They got this big need to fill in their offensive line, and you want them to make the big splash, and you want them to get the big names. And it sounds like they were in on a couple of them, but it got too rich for them, and maybe that's due for the fact that they have so many spots to fill or whatever. But it's also really, I think, something people don't factor in is Rick Spielman has said this many times that the Vikings, or he likes to more dive in the second day of free agency rather than the first. Obviously they needed to get something done immediately in the offensive line, but as far as, anything else they might be doing, he's going to wait for things to settle down, because I think, you're going to find not necessarily bargains, but you can maybe find more people to fill some needs if you sit around and see those people are, see if they go to visit everybody else, they aren't so costly, and then you can get them for a better price. And so I think that's part of what's going on.
Do you feel like, though, historically with Spielman and the free agents, like that's philosophy has worked for us? Like,
yes.
It's a genuine question. I'm not implying one way or the other, but I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking probably pretty heavily at last season with the moves they made on the offensive line, and I do think Alex Boone was a good move. I think we were connected to the Mike Iapati, if that's how you say his name. It sounds funny now that I'm saying it out loud. Move, and he was, the elite guy last year. He was probably too expensive for our blood at the time.
Yep.
But, when you end up with guys like Andre Smith or whatever, I'm just trying to think of, like, bargains that have actually worked out for them.
Linval Joseph and Captain Munderland are big ones.
But those were kind of premier guys, though, at the time, though. We gave him, like, pretty decent
Linval
contracts.
wasn't at all. I mean, we gave Linval a decent contract, and I remember the attitude around it was like, oh my god, who's this guy we just paid all this money to?
Right. I agree. He seemed like kind of not an afterthought, but all of a sudden, oh, okay, they got this guy. And then, after you see him play and how, Zimmer sees him play and loves him up, and you see that, why did the Giants let him go? But, I thought that was a really good pickup.
Yeah, I think it's really important to evaluate free agency not on what the team did and not on what the team didn't do. Because there's 150 free agents and we get 2 of them. Looking at the other 148 guys, you're always going to find people you wish you had. For just about any team is going to find people they wish they had. So I think it's more important to look at who the team did get and then evaluate from there. And if you look at Reef and Remmers and you don't like those people and you don't want them to be our tackles, then I think you have plenty of license to be upset. But looking at guys that they didn't get, like 31 other teams also didn't get that guy. And a lot of, like the Seahawks also, didn't get Andrew Whitworth, and so did the Broncos and the Panthers. Like there's a lot of teams that didn't get a guy. That doesn't mean every single one of those teams suddenly has a bad GM.
It's a great point. He saw it today, or at least later today. I saw late today that TJ Lang was all set. He was all set to sign with Seattle, and then Detroit ups their ante. And so he says, okay, see you later. We don't know how much of that goes on.
Seattle doesn't even get a chance to counter either. It's just like you just got swooped.
Exactly, and that's going to happen. I'm sure Ricky Wagner got real expensive for him, and Whitworth. That sounded like Whitworth never even considered the Vikings wanted to go west. We also have here where 2/3 of the show is located is the hinterland that nobody wants to come to, and LA sounds better. So I mean maybe that's part of it. It's always been I used to work in the Timberwolves. And
I was going to say, that's kind of a big basketball thing. But that's,
they could never sign him. Yeah, they could never sign somebody here for that.
There's been wide receivers like I think Mike Wallace and someone else that didn't want to come here because of the weather. I mean, granted, we were playing outside at the time, but I think that's become. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I mean, it factors into it, but it's also a lot of it comes down to money. I mean. Of course, that's stating the obvious, but for him to come right out and say that, they upped their ante, and I said, oh, see you later. TJ Lang's gone, so I bet you never even considered here just because we are the Vikings.
Well, I feel like when it comes to Remmers and Reef, like at least maybe I'm projecting what I believed last season more than what the consensus was, but it seemed like a lot of people were saying, or at least I was saying to myself, that if we just had a decent offensive line, we could compete or be like maybe not a contender, but we wouldn't have fallen apart like we did after the bye week. These aren't huge signings. They're not Whitworth. They're not Zeitler or whatever. But
they are starting tackles. So
exactly. And
they are starting quality
exactly.
tackles. And they should be better because they're going. Last year, both of them were playing on the side that they're not comfortable in.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like a huge thing. I think some of the animosity that I'm picking up on since I spend all day on our Facebook page is that it's not so much the signings or the lack of signings, it's more of the quote-unquote mass exodus, to quote Ricky Ellison.
Jesus Christ.
Of
whatever
of
shall
players,
we do without Matt Tillio?
Basically, there is a weird juxtaposition between like Spielman coming out last week and Joe wrote an article about this. He had like a little sheet of paper and he was saying that the plan for the Vikings is to draft, develop, and retain. And then it seemed like everybody that they've done that with, who was an unrestricted free agent, just up and left. To me, I can see where people feel like it just hasn't been handled the best way. Like, people, the thing with free agency is like you don't want to be a reactive team, you want to be a proactive team, and it seems like when your punter leaves and you wanted to keep him, or people that you didn't expect to leave end up leaving, it just seems like maybe they didn't expect there to be a market, or it just seems like we went into free agency with like 2 or 3 needs and now we have like 6. And so, obviously there's a lot of time left and we're looking at, replacing Captain Munderland. and everything, but it just seems like as a net positive or negative right now, we're kind of in the red, I guess.
I can't go there, Joe. I saw the numbers and the names creeping out, and all of a sudden you kind of go, shit, or sorry, excuse me, shoot, what's going on here? But I go down the list now, and I can see for just about every one of them except for Locke. That one surprised me. You can see why they left. I mean, I don't think Khalil likes playing football that much, and so he's a businessman. He's going to go try to get as much money as he can get and get out of the league. Go play with his brother. I think that's a no-brainer. We kind of felt that was coming. Munnerlyn, he used to play there. He's got friends there. Maybe soured on Zimmer. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or whatever happened there, but I think there was, possibly he left Carolina, so he knows how to go market himself to make more money. So that was, while I was bummed about that one didn't surprise me either. Audie Cole wants to play somewhere, for crying out loud. Charles Johnson, the team didn't want to use him this year. He wasn't even in their plans.
He could have been a restricted free agent, and they could have tendered him. They distinctly decided not to retain Charles Johnson and let him go elsewhere. That was mutual, if anything. If Charles Johnson wanted to stay, he wouldn't have stayed.
And he came in because of Norv Turner, who's no longer there anymore. Norv Turner got him from the Packers to Cleveland, had him in Cleveland, and then brought him over here to the Vikings. So, maybe that's part of the thing too. I don't know. But it just doesn't surprise me. I think, there is a couple, you got to find out slot corner now. That's something got to go. You got more holes in the You got to find a punter.
Yeah.
I understand.
I think there's 2 points that are worth mentioning. One is that free agency does not award players who evaluate, or they don't reward teams who evaluate players correctly. They reward teams who evaluate players highly. So whoever thinks you're the best and therefore is willing to pay you the most, usually you get. So if somebody thinks, a guy like Jeff Locke is way better than he actually is, he's going to go to that team. And by the way, punter article dropping soon. Jeff Locke is not good.
Yay!
He had a great article. He had a great year though. This last year, the previous three or how many he had were not. But last year,
I disagree with that.
Really?
I did the same punter deal that we talked about with Cluey a few episodes ago. He ended up being like 6th worst in the league or something like that. He was just right near the bottom again.
Wow.
In regards to like the formula that you came up with?
Yes, and they also have Jeff Locke's replacement on a futures contract.
Bullringer?
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Yes, Bullringer is going to be our new punter.
Yes. I wanted to go back to what Joe said about how some of the moves weren't surprising. And just ask a question and then also point something out. Well, I'll point something out first just because it's easier that way. But I do think that people are ignoring the fact that letting Khalil go was a positive. I mean, he got $11 million from the Panthers, which is just insane to me. So if they would have re-signed him, and the reaction from people that are upset about not getting Whitworth or whatever, it would have been a mutiny for sure. I mean, to pay that much money for somebody. Yeah.
His contract was pretty close though.
Yeah, but I think he's a better player. Yeah, so there's a difference there. I
haven't spent a lot of time watching him, so I wouldn't say it.
I can speak to that in a second. I did a lot this weekend.
I read like 3 Bleacher Report articles from 2013, so I think I know a lot about it. But when Joe, I just wanted to bring back like the net positive or negative in regards to where we're at right now with free agency, and obviously it's not over yet. There's still some players out there, but in regards to saying it wasn't surprising that people left like Captain Munnerlyn, that doesn't mean that. I mean, just because we understand the logic of it doesn't mean that it's not going to end up hurting the team. I mean, it looks like from what I've been reading, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're in one of the 4 teams in the race for the most aptly named player in NFL history, Nickel Roby-Coleman.
God, I love it.
The DB that used to play for the Buffalo Bills, and it's from what I've read, and it hasn't been much. It's like 2 articles, but he's going to be probably more expensive than Munnerlyn was, but he's not as good because he's really undersized. So it's like stuff like that kind of, I guess, is, if you're spending more to bring in a player of lesser quality, that's not a good thing either. I think there's something to that.
I actually really like Roby-Coleman as an option.
I don't think people take into consideration that you need two to tango, and if the guy wants to go, he's going to go. You know, you don't
and
know
if
what
the team doesn't want him for that price, you know, if Carolina thought Captain Munnerlyn is worth more than we think Captain Munnerlyn is worth, even if we think he's good, if Carolina thinks he's better, they get him.
Yeah, and you're never going to hear from Spielman, Zimmer, whoever, what they did or didn't do. But it's all in my mind.
Do we know if they wanted to keep Munnerlyn? I mean, was that the plan?
Absolutely, I think so.
You know, I wonder. There's a difference to me logically in saying like, well, another team will outspend. If you look at everything on an individual basis, player by player, you can always find a rationalization for why they left. But then when you look at the thing as a whole, and a couple players that you wanted to keep end up leaving, you're replacing them with at least more expensive and maybe the same production, maybe worse, maybe better, whatever.
It also depends on what you got coming up behind him. I mean, as we're going to get into Rhett Ellison later, but 2 years ago I would have been bummed that he was gone, but I can let it happen now because I think David Morgan is going to be just as good, or coming up behind him, and
we have a cheaper version of him already on the roster. Why pay the guy?
Exactly. And in Munnerlyn's case, I don't know yet, but we do have the cornerback whisper, and he really likes I can't think of his name, Alexander. So maybe he can step in there, if not this year, the next year, and they get somebody to hold the place for a while. So I think those are all factors, and the cost. And when you have so many, and when you do have a salary cap, you got to fit this whole puzzle together. And so I try to look at it globally because that that's what they have to do, and who knows what happens.
I think if you're worried about something like all this exodus of players, nobody wants to play here anymore, I think you're working yourself into a tizzy. I don't think there's really any evidence of that at all. Players leave teams and go to other teams every year. Like this shouldn't be surprising to us.
Well, I think that,
but like losing pieces, I mean, losing Captain Munnerlyn sucks, and that I wish they would have been it, because the money he got at in Carolina, I think we could have paid him easily, and I wish they would have matched that or outbid that.
I agree with you.
But like, and that sucks.
Maybe they did.
But like Rhett Ellison, whatever.
They did.
Audi Cole, who cares? Jeff Locke is bad. Like all of these players are not. These players aren't like, we're not losing huge pieces. We made upgrades at the two worst positions on the whole team last year, which were left tackle and right tackle. We upgraded them and added competent starters, which. So I think if on an overall level, I would call it a net positive, even though we lost some like random depth players and whatever, and because a lot of those random depth players already have their replacements on the roster.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the reaction, because it does seem like the fan reaction is overwhelmingly negative, but maybe that's just because it's a Facebook thing.
Always, I think. It's always negative.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of factors. I think people saw that we had a decent amount of money available with Adrian Peterson leaving. They had really high expectations for players that we didn't get. And then there was two things that happened that I think skewed the way people are viewing things. I think, obviously, we'll talk about this later, but the Rhett Ellison's dad thing was the worst timing of all time because it coincides with those players leaving, and it makes it seem like the team has given up. And with the team falling apart after the bye and the defense at really inopportune times not playing the way that we were used to, especially against like the Lions both times at the end of the game. I think people believe that there's some truth to that players aren't on the same page as Zimmer anymore and they don't want to play for him. Captain Munnerlyn being a good example of that, like Joe said, I think we did probably match, or we could have matched what the Panthers said, but I don't think Munnerlyn wanted to play here anymore because he was in the doghouse or whatever a couple years ago. And then you combine that with a move like the Alshon Jeffrey thing where it seemed like why did we at the last, and this happens all the time, so I'm just saying this is devil's advocate. Why did we at the last second? It seemed like, okay, we were trying to go after people like Russell Okun or whatever. It didn't work, so oh my God, Alshon Jeffrey's available at the last second. Let's throw him a bunch of money to compensate.
You got to replace Charles Johnson, Joe, for crying out loud.
You got to replace Cordero Patterson. They have no interest in keeping him.
Yeah, so I think that's just
absolutely nothing.
I'm trying to explain why people are being negative about it. It just seemed like those combination of factors, like the Alshon Jeffrey thing, just seemed again reactive and just odd. And then you get the weird social media stuff.
We don't know Do we know when or how they went in on him? I don't.
It said it was the last.
You know the timing of when it leaked.
Yes, exactly.
So, well, from what I read, they came in at the last minute, according to people on Twitter, whatever that means. So it didn't seem like they were with one of the original teams that were going after him. But then after Russell Okun was tampered with, essentially, I think they decided.
And we get notifications of 5 teams are interested in this player, and the Vikings are one of them. So therefore, in fans' minds, boom, we should be right up there going after it and getting whoever it is if it's someone they really want to.
Yeah, but the news on this was that they did make there was details to it. I mean, they made a bigger offer and a longer-term offer for more money to Alshon Jeffrey. He just wanted to be a free agent again next season because he thinks he'll get more money. So, I mean, it wasn't that it was like a Roby Coleman thing where it's like 4 teams are in the running. It was like an actual pitch for more money than he got from Philadelphia.
So why do you blame the Vikings for that?
I don't personally blame them for that. I'm just saying that I think people interpreted that as like a panic move. Like, why are we going after a big-name wide receiver when...
That's not a panic move.
No.
Because he's Alshon Jeffrey. He's a really good player, and they tried to land him.
Right.
Man, you don't you miss on the bad players, you're bad. You try to go for the good, or you go for the good players, you're bad. You don't go for the good players, you're bad.
People didn't interpret that as a need, and it more seemed like because of the timing of it that they came into free agency not understanding that they weren't going to land a lot of the players that they wanted to, so they had extra money and decided, let's go after this. He is a great player. Why not add him to the roster? But it didn't seem like it was a plan ahead of time. Otherwise, they would have been in the running from the get-go.
It might have been, though, because...
That makes some sense.
But Charles Johnson didn't leave until after this happened. So they probably anticipated they weren't going to tender Johnson, so there was room for another receiver who, a big body receiver who can get him score some touchdowns. They even call it a spot for a number 1 receiver while the other 2 younger guys grow. So in their minds, it could have been. It was just not in fans' minds. We got it as they went after Alshon Jeffrey. Like, what are we going to do with him? Well, now you find out later there's less receivers on the roster. It might be 2 less. You might even lose Patterson. So
I think among fans. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, personally, I wrote some articles about this. I found out within a 5-minute period that we were interested in Alshon Jeffrey. I got so excited that I had to go sit on the toilet, and then 2 minutes later I found out that we didn't get him, and so I kind of wrote about my emotional and digestive roller coaster, and I wanted him. I mean, I was super excited about the move, so it's not like I'm saying...
I missed that story, Joe, sorry.
It's sponsored by Metamucil, but it was... I thought it was a good move, and I don't think it was a panic move. I'm just more doing a devil's advocate thing, just because I've seen so many people talking about it. But no, I would have been. I've said this. I would have been ecstatic if we got Alshon Jeffrey, depending on the price, just because he has all those soft tissue injuries and everything. I personally was more excited about Terrell Pryor, to be honest.
That would have been fun.
And I somehow had the ability to direct message him on Twitter, so I tried to be a journalist and ask him if he was meeting with the Vikings. And
my takeaway from that dalliance with Jeffrey was, what does that say about our last year rookie number 1 over pick? And it's like, shoot,
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't go into the season with only 3 functional wide receivers. You can't go into a season with only 3 functional wide receivers and a Jarius Wright.
No, I agree. You just wish that at some point this guy, you hoped he was going to jump up, and there's you don't know that until next year if he will, but they obviously must have some concerns if they want to.
I think that's a huge part of it, and I think I forgot to say that's part of where the panic move came. Not so much the panic move, but with Luke saying earlier that you can't base say a GM suddenly bad because of one free agency period or whatever, not getting a specific player. I think people are looking at the Treadwell thing, saying you spent a first-round pick on this guy, and now you're trying to sign a big-bodied receiver in the next free agency period to a long-term contract. I don't know.
I don't think anyone in the entire world expected Treadwell to be better than Alshon Jeffrey.
No, but,
and I don't think the Vikings did when they drafted him either.
That's not what I mean, though. I mean, at some point, he has to play. I mean, he's a first-round draft pick, and he's not going to – essentially, the move indicated that they don't have –
You think he's not going to play? Well, I'll bet you.
Do you think
but if they'd have got Jeffrey in here and you have him and Diggs and Thielen, and if they hung on to Patterson, there might not be a lot of room for him again next year.
Do you not think that the Jeffrey move was an indication of a lack of
I
confidence
don't
in
think
Treadwell, though?
No, not at all. He's Alshon Jeffrey. Would you sign Antonio Brown? The Giants just signed Brandon Marshall. Is that an indication about Odell Beckham?
No, because
one of the best wide receivers in the league does not indicate anything about your roster.
That's different because Odell Beckham's the number one receiver, and Brandon Marshall acknowledged that coming in. He's not coming in to play in lieu of Odell Beckham Jr. That's a completely different situation.
Okay, then does it indicate anything about Sterling Shepard? Are people going to be worried he can't be the number 2 guy now? No, of course not. He's just a good player. Go get a good one.
I think when you have a number one a number one pick, and it's his second season, and the indication is he's not capable of cracking this top 3 receiving core to the point where you need to go out and land probably the number 1 free agent wide receiver. It's an indication that he's not. I mean, the bottom line.
The indication is that you said need. Nobody said need. We're not sitting here going, oh my God, we didn't get Jeffrey. Now we have to start Treadwell. What a disaster. No, he's Alshon Jeffrey. I mean, if we were trying to go out and get, Jeffrey and Pryor were like arguably top 10 receivers. If we were trying to go out and get like Marcus Lattimore and Chris Hogan, then I would be worried. But like, those are just very talented offensive weapons, and an offense that definitely needs them.
Because they spent the number 1 pick on a wide receiver that isn't going to be a weapon. I mean, separate.
Even if Treadwell was a weapon, okay. If Treadwell was good, say we go to an alternate universe where Treadwell had 950-yard season, just like Diggs and Thielen, and was very promising, I would still want him to go out and get Alshon Jeffrey. I just don't think it indicates anything about anyone else on the roster.
I agree, Luke. I don't think Joe is disagreeing with that. I wonder.
I do disagree with it.
Okay, then I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Because when it said that Spielman likes to wait a day and not go after the top guys and overspend, or let's even separate Alshon Jeffrey from the equation completely, and just look at Treadwell. He
was very active on the first day. He signed Riley Reif right away, went for Jeffrey. He was very active on the first day. I don't really get that narrative.
That's what he said in the past.
Well, since when does Rick Spielman's word mean anything?
Okay, well, any of that the point I'm making is Treadwell isn't developing the way that they expected him to. I mean, we can say that, yeah, you always want to add a great player.
You need to be mad about that, but adding Jeffrey is not the thing that indicates it, and that's not really the news right now.
I don't know.
I just don't see it, man. Jeffrey indicates nothing about Treadwell's development. You can still say, well, yeah, Treadwell's development is disappointing separately from that. But going after a free agent does not mean anything. A free agent of Jeffrey's caliber means nothing about the players already on your roster. Going after a free agent of Mike Remmers' caliber says a lot about your tackle.
Do you think they would have gone after Jeffrey if they didn't feel with not so much Charles Johnson, but maybe not bringing back Cordero Patterson, that they needed a reliable third guy?
What do you mean? Like would they have gone after? If they had kept Patterson, would they have gone after Alshon Jeffrey? Yeah, I would totally be for that. I was for that last year when there was a lot of talk of Jeffrey.
It's not whether or not you're for it. It's whether or not the opportunity would have presented itself if they didn't feel there was a need.
I think that would have been a very I think that is something they would have done.
Since when do the Vikings add superstar depth and through free agency when they don't need it? I think there's a need for it. Otherwise, they're not in the position to add luxury players. They really haven't ever done that. There's a need at wide receiver, obviously, and when you have a first-round pick and he's not, of course no one's mad about it. I don't expect Spielman to be ranting and raving in the media about it, but it indicates to me that obviously Treadwell isn't where you would expect a first-round wide receiver to be.
I think Treadwell is not where you would expect your first-round wide receiver to be, but I don't think the chase of Jeffrey is what indicates that at all.
Okay, well, I guess it doesn't matter, but it just seems to me that if there's a need, and he would fulfill that need. But there's also a need for that type of receiver on the team. I mean, we need a big guy that can go down the field and run, 4-3 or whatever. But
so, just in the interest of like another topic, the other thing that I think fans don't really understand is that in free agency, a player you are interested in signing somewhere else is not losing. Like if you were in on a player and you gave him an offer, take Rick Wagner, for example. I think he's from Detroit, so he signed in Detroit. That means that doesn't mean you lost. That doesn't mean you are a bad GM because you didn't get your guy. It means you tried to get someone and he went somewhere else, and that sucks that you didn't get your guy. but I think fans like see this as we're losing a game. Like they treat it like we just lost a game to the Chicago Bears on Monday night, and it's not the same thing. It's disappointing to not get a weapon, but it still is something that.
If you look at it as like over from a case-by-case basis, you can say that, but like over the course of years, if that was the case where we were getting beaten all the time and there was always an excuse for it, like you can make that argument. I don't think
Would you rather have overpaid for Mike Iapati? Like that's why they don't do that.
No, I'm not saying that I personally believe that. I'm saying I think that that's why the argument doesn't make sense. You know, to say that we're losing right now, I don't think historically that's been proven. I mean, we've gotten a lot of free agents that we've gotten after.
And most people that say that we're losing are always looking at the players the Vikings don't get, they're not looking objectively on the sum total and adding them all up.
Can we talk about the players we did get? Because we haven't really talked about them at all. Yeah, we talked about Treadwell for like a half hour.
We touched on Riley Reef and Remmers, and Joe wrote a great piece about Remmers, so we can start there. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm super comfortable with the moves they made on the line. I mean, I think the line on paper right now is leaps and bounds at least better than they were last season. You know, I don't know, Joe. I mean, if you want to talk about kind of what your piece was, you guys can talk about your thoughts on Remmers first.
You know, it's a crapshoot like everything else. You wonder why somebody leaves. You wonder why Detroit goes out and signs. They signed Wagner, but it was Wagner, and then to let Reef go. You know, why is that? That's a little concerning. It's not overall concerning, but the Vikings are still in a position where they did better there. I believe, at least what we've gotten out of Khalil in the past years. He's got, hopefully going back to left tackle will be good for him. He played that originally, got moved to right last year when they drafted somebody to play left, and now they went and signed another tackle. So I worry about that a little bit, but like I said, I think we're still coming out ahead in that. Wagner, you know, not the big name. You could look at it as a swap of Khalil for Wagner, and they're both
healthy. Remmers.
Yeah,
Remmers. I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said Wagner.
Oh God. I'm sorry. Yeah, Remmers. And both he and Reef are 27, 28. They're healthy. They could be good for a long time, you know, and they have not missed many games. I think
it's a big deal.
Remmers hasn't missed a game since he became a starter 2.5 seasons ago, and Reef has only missed like 3 games in 5 years, which is pretty darn good. Now, I hope their numbers aren't up as a result if they come to the jinxed Minnesota Vikings offensive line. But we got to find some wood. Okay, I just knocked down the wood. So I think it's so far so good. You know, you maybe give chance for TJ Clemmings to go learn for a while and maybe see if he can resurrect his brain and his competitiveness and his confidence. And you got Searles back. You re-signed him. You've got Alex Boone and Joe Berger decides comes back, which I think is great because he could play guard or center. If you put Nick Easton in center, then you move him to guard. I don't know. So I'm okay. I'm not doing cartwheels, but I'm pleased with what they did, and they had to do it. They had to go out and pay this kind of money for these guys. These guys both got nice contracts for maybe their reputation out there. But
go ahead.
No, you can go because my point is kind of a tangent anyway.
So I did a little bit of tape. I looked at a little bit of tape for Reef of 2015 when he was on the left because it's almost certain that he's going to be the left tackle, not the right tackle, which a lot of Reef's bad press from last year came because he was at right tackle. And he actually got some bad press in 2015 for some stuff that I don't think was his fault, but that's different.
What do you mean?
He had a fairly bad game on Sunday Night Football against Denver, and he just kind of got worked by DeMarcus Ware because that happens to everybody. But he did also have like a not very good game, but he also got blamed for some other things, like some sacks that weren't on him, and there was a sack fumble that he was in the replay of, but the pressure came from the other side, so I think people just blamed him for that.
Okay.
But overall, what I gathered from Reef is he is not strong, and that shows up. Like, his combine scores weren't very good. He's not an athlete. He's a finesse guy. I think a good way to describe him is he's what we wanted Khalil to be.
Okay.
He's a more finesse. He's a more skilled and technical, and he's very mobile. He's good at moving around and getting in the right position. He's good at getting to the second level on run blocking. But like, he won't give you like a goal line push. He doesn't, quote, dent people, as Tony Sperano so masterfully said.
Maulers.
Yeah, he's definitely not a mauler. He's more of a, he'll always be in the right position. You can't spin around him. It's really hard to rush up field and get around him. But if you bull rush and just, try to back him up into the quarterback, you can get pressures that way. Overall, I think he looks like an average, serviceable, but flawed left tackle, and I think we should be thrilled with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I brought up earlier and that was actually what my tangent was going to be, that, I think people, because of the amount of money they saw for free agency, like I said earlier, or cap space rather, that they expected us to go out and pick up like 2 elite players for the offensive line. But again, as far as I remember, a lot of the talk was like, God, if we just had a decent offensive line, like the team would be so much better. The defense wouldn't be on the field all the time. We wouldn't have all those turnovers like we did in the Eagles game. I think people are just forgetting that this team can do a lot with a average to a slightly above average line. I mean, I don't know. I think having Reef next to Boone will be a huge upgrade, personally. So I think people are kind of down on it for the wrong reasons.
Remmers also had to move to left tackle last year and will be moving back to the right side. And he got the most bad press he's had was getting rocked by Von Miller in the Super Bowl. And it's like he's Von Miller.
Yeah, he was the.
I am a little worried though. I am a little worried about having 2 players that are coming into a new system and switching positions right away.
Yeah,
that's seems like Fusco times 2, and I'm a little bit concerned about that. And I think we'll probably see
aren't they
a
going back to
regression
the
from
positions that they're more comfortable in though, or?
Yeah, we said that about Fusco last year though, and like, look how that turned out.
Yeah, he went to Slippery Rock though. I mean, we can't forget that.
There goes our one listener from Slippery Rock.
Come back.
That was actually the one listener. We don't have any anymore.
Yeah,
he was the only guy.
I thought I could get him with some irony, but
yeah. So what I think that means to me is I would project them to not be as good as they were in 2015, but still they won't be Khalil and Clemmings and Andre Smith and all that. They'll be just below average, and I think as their contracts progress, they'll improve and get better, and I think by like year 2 or 3 of this, we're going to be a lot happier than we are right now.
We've said this a lot of times on this show, but it's anyone but Clemmings, you can't really argue.
I mean, Clemmings, just to put this in perspective, and regardless of what you think of PFF, they can only be so wrong about some of these things. Clemmings had like a 28 out of 100 in PFF, and both of these guys had 66 and 67. Yep. That's a huge upgrade, and I think it does a really good job of illustrating how happy we should be to be, like, fine. To have, like, mediocre.
I think we can say that Clemmings is not a left tackle. I'm hopeful for the guy who is an athlete.
He's a rosterable NFL player.
Pardon me?
I don't think TJ Clemmings is a rosterable NFL player.
Yeah, I know you don't. And I'm still hopeful for him, because, they saw an athlete in him. They drafted him rather highly, and you've said more than once that he's probably got ruined, being switched back and forth and rushed in too quickly. His confidence is shot. So I would still take him I would look at him another. He's still on a contract. I would use him another year as a backup right tackle and see if something can happen there. And if not, then say goodbye. But I'm not ready to throw him out yet.
Yeah, like you said, it's hard to blame the guy. I mean, he's had the weirdest start to his career ever. But that doesn't change the fact that he was had one of the worst games since the Bull Leather helmet era, according to Pro Football Focus last season.
That's unfortunate.
But yeah, so I mean, going into this week with free agency and stuff, I mean, what do you guys think in regards to some of the needs that they can fulfill? Also, I think people are overlooking too that by adding Reef and Remmers, it gives us more options in the draft. I think there's some people were trying to mitigate panic by saying, well, after the people were upset about the Remmers and Reef moves, that there was a couple draft experts, quote unquote, on Twitter that said, well, the Vikings are talking about trading up into the first round to get a left tackle or whatever. I don't necessarily think that they would do that, considering they just signed these guys, unless they want to develop somebody. And it's a pretty terrible tackle market anyway. But my point is that it opens up options in the draft, and also in regards to what we can look at this week. So
if you trade up, you're getting Forrest Lamp. That's who you trade up for. Forrest Lamp would be an immediate plug-and-play starter at right guard, and he'd be a 10-year guy.
Ooh.
But he'll be gone. He'll be long gone by the time we pick. So that's who you'd have to trade up for.
Where do you think they'd have to get?
End of the first.
Okay, so
what I'm hearing
in the 20s.
Yeah, in the late 20s, I think.
Where's our pick?
7 to 30. Our pick is 48, so we'd have to give up a substantial sum.
They have 2 third-rounders, right? So they can bargain with one there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you guys think about? We kind of touched on this earlier, but Mr.
They also got Mr. running back.
Yeah. I mean,
that's another hole. I mean, when people are complaining about not spending big dollars for one of the big name linemen, they got to remember, they got the money back from Peterson, but they also there's a huge hole there at running back. We have Jerick McKinnon, but
that's the only one on the whole roster right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love the draft for that though. There's a bunch of guys that we can get, and they're projected to go in like the 3rd and 4th round, but because of the depth and just the sheer amount of running backs, they're guys that would go in the 2nd round of other drafts, and there's just so many of them that somebody's going to fall.
Best draft running back class ever, according to Spielman.
That's what they say.
There's other people who say that, I think, too. And I don't think Spielman.
How would you feel about the Vikings drafting or trading up for a running back? You wouldn't do that in a draft like this, but that's just the kind of thing they might.
That would be unbelievably stupid. I would be very mad because you don't have to. Yep. You have to go get a guy like Forrest Lamp because the offensive line guys are depleted. Although there are guards you can get if you do want to just sit at 48, you'll have a chance at a guy like Dan Feeney or somebody like Taylor Moton. But if you went up for a running back in a draft where you can get a running back of comparable quality in the 4th round, I'd be pretty mad.
We also always get teased by that language, a running back rich draft and a running back, an offensive line poor draft. What does that mean exactly? Are there a lot of running backs that are pretty good but maybe there's no Ezekiel Elliott, or does that mean there's what exactly does that mean? I think we all think when we hear this, oh God, there's all these Ezekiel Elliott's we can get in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. It's kind of amorphous. It's not an exact language, and I always kind of say, well.
So I can clarify that with the running backs.
You can clarify that. Oh, okay.
Yes. Well, I can answer that question. I think what people usually are meaning when they say it's a strong running back class is there are guys at the top like Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey who are. I don't think they're Ezekiel Elliott levels, but they're that guy of the draft. They're the Todd Gurley's and the big names that are going to be plug and play immediate superstars drafted in fantasy.
You're going to trade with me for next year in fantasy football?
I don't need that right now.
Todd Gurley joke.
Listen. But there's also behind those guys there's numerous good running backs, not Ezekiel Elliott's, but guys that can come in and be part of a committee and contribute very positively, and there's a lot of them, which means that your value is going to go up. And conversely with tackles, there's Cam Robinson, and I think there's one other tackle that people like, but there's really only the 2. So if you're a team that needs a tackle, you're going to get them. You're going to have first right of refusal, and you have to go get that tackle. And if you aren't lucky enough to have a high first-round pick, or if you're like us and you don't have one at all, you have no chance at a guy like Cam Robinson. So you have to kind of sit there.
The rest of guys in the draft as a tackle are worthless. I mean, like I said, it just says it's rich or poor. It's not very descriptive. I would love to see. You've looked at the running backs. You know what grade they are. It seems to me we get teased by that a little bit. And I bet there are going to be there's 2 decent tackles. Well, they're going to go, if they're really decent, they're going to go very, very high, and there's no
And somebody will go in the second round this year who may have gone in the fourth round in a different draft because there just isn't a lot of other talent competing with him. So you'll have to reach on someone, and that's what they mean when they say a bad tackle class is the value is poor. You're getting second round worthy guys in the first round because there aren't any first round worthy guys, or you're getting fourth round worthy guys in the second round because you just ran out of options and you have to take that guy now.
Yeah, I think Joe's point is that I guess people are speaking about it like it's the objective truth, whereas the draft is a huge crapshoot. You get guys Khalil are supposed to be like the safe picks, and they don't work out and whatever. You look at the running back class of 2 years ago. You have like Melvin Gordon coming out. A lot of Big Ten guys. I mean, Tevin Coleman is good. Amir Abdullah, and people are saying like the Vikings should have gone after one of those guys. And you see like Detroit Arizona on whatever TV show they had. Super depressed that Amir Abdullah got taken before they could take him. They end up with David Johnson. It just
right.
It doesn't.
Yeah, that's always
kind of my point. And we should do a draft show, a pre-draft. Running up to the draft of a show. Go back and examine a draft from 3 years ago, or when we've always said that you can never fully evaluate a draft until 3 or 4 years later or something.
We gotta get JR on the show.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah,
he knows these things.
He's on next week.
J.R. Ryder?
Oh, wow.
Timberwolves?
Yeah, he's been kicking women at the Mall of America still. And last week,
Luke, a big draft.
Yeah, Luke was. You can explain who he is and let people know.
He's J.R. Reed Draft Scout on Twitter, and he tweets a lot about the draft. He's kind of like me, where he does it as a hobby and he just likes it. But he's very passionate about the draft and looking at college guys, and he has all kinds of takes and opinions on who the people actually are and where they're going to go and why they should go there. And he's just a generally really smart guy.
He writes for the Viking Age too, I think, doesn't he?
Oh, he does write for the Viking Age. That's true.
Yay!
But yeah, he's a very he's one of the people on Twitter whose opinions I respect. So I think that'll be very good to get his insight.
I do follow him. He's going to be on here.
Yeah, next week. We talked about him last week, so I sent him a tweet saying, as one of the people that Luke doesn't respect on Twitter, I sent it to him and said, check it out. We shouted you out pretty heavily on the show, and he said, I loved the show. Thanks for shouting me out. He's like, I'd love to come on the show sometime. I was like, yes, please. So, yeah, that's locked in for next week. That'll be pretty cool. But since we were talking about the running back class and the draft and everything, obviously one of the larger stories over the weekend at least was Adrian Peterson meeting with Seattle, and then the Vikings obviously meeting with Eddie Lacy. So I posted an article basically just saying Eddie Lacy left without a contract, AP left Seattle without a contract. Who would you rather have on the team? And I swear to God, there's been 300 messages that all conflict one another on our Facebook feed. But
pretty good.
Don't care.
I guess my question is, do you guys even, if you don't care, do you think they should just wipe their hands of it or wash their hands of it and draft somebody?
Eddie's teasing the Vikings and Adrian Peterson, whatever. We'll see what happens there.
I think if the Vikings wanted Adrian back, he'd be back by now.
Yes.
I don't think there's any chance. Also, drafting people is very cheap, especially if you get fourth round guy. That's going to be really cheap, and we'd have to pay Eddie Lacy non-negligible money. So I'd rather just go with that. Although between the two, I don't know. I don't really want either of them. Lacy's fine, I guess, but he's got conditioning issues and can't play a full game.
Big time. And I think people are overinflating him because he seems to play well against the Vikings, but that doesn't...
Overinflating, you say?
I kind of like one stat that's out there on him, though. He's given up one sack in, as a pass protector. That's pretty dang good.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
He's got a good yards per carry. So here's the thing. This is something that I have to credit to Justice Mosqueda. He's a Packer fan, but a big draft analyst, and he comes on Vikings podcasts all the time, for Packers game previews, is a opinion from the other side. And he pointed out something that I don't think I've ever seen happen. Eddie Lacy cannot do a 2-minute drill. He can't be on for a no huddle run up and
because he's not conditioned well
enough.
Yeah, man. That's, to me,
Well, the practices are too hard over there in Green Bay, just like here.
God, man, I mean, I don't know. If you're a professional running back and you're not in good shape, like, why would any team want somebody with that mentality? He's lazy, and I have this theory that I've been floating around that everybody hates, and I'm still going to stick with it. That obviously there's players. It doesn't matter what conference they come through or whatever, but that get through. Growing up in high school and college, but just on sheer talent and genetic blessings, and he hasn't had to try. If you're overweight as a running back in 2017, I mean that's just a huge thing,
Yeah, weight management is hard. Some people just have a body where it's hard to keep the weight off, and it's kind of a random genetic lottery thing. But I think it's. Like, the Packers liked having Eddie Lacy because he is heavy. Try to slow that guy down. I don't care if it's fat or muscle. He weighs a lot. It's just a conditioning issue, which puts a big wrench in your game plan.
That's the thing. I mean, genetics or not, I mean, there's nose tackles that are 400 pounds that can play, and he should be conditioned well enough to do a 2-minute drill, for Christ's sake. I hadn't heard that. That's
agreed. It's a huge problem. I guess I would take issue with the idea of lazy because there's other reasons that could happen. But regardless of the reason, it's a problem.
Yeah, I guess we don't need to argue about that, but it's
he's a potentially scary pickup. But when you look at him and how he can he can break tackles through sheer size and strength and power, and he can block for our fragile quarterback situation. It's enticing, but by the same token, you pay the man, and is he going to get more fired up to come into camp, ready to go like he's supposed to be? It can be an issue. I think the Vikings wouldn't need him for a 2-minute drill per se. They could run in Jared McKinnon out there, but part of me is intrigued by it, but ultimately, still part of me.
I was too until I honest. I'm pretty honest about my knowledge of these things. So I hadn't heard the 2-minute drill thing. That's like such a big red flag to me. But yeah,
I can't 100% verify it. But Justice is not the kind of guy that would just make things up. He's a pretty well-respected dude.
Yeah, man, that's
good Twitter follow for draft season.
Yeah, Stark saw the field a lot for the Packers. You would think I could believe that that's true. James Stark spelled him quite a bit.
And I guess Lacy's going to. He's probably in Green Bay right now, hearing them out, he said, but he also said that his visit with Minnesota, which was 2 days, I guess, because he refused to leave Manny's. I'm kidding. I don't know. Like Joe said earlier, maybe he's just messing with the Packers and trying to get more money by going to, their arch enemy or whatever. But I don't know. It's
good strategy.
It's not a fun argument like AP versus Eddie Lacy. It's not like win-win. It's kind of there's flaws to both of them, and at this point, I mean, I personally think that with the moves they made for the offensive line, unless they do trade up for Lamp, that we should just start fresh and try to start a decent running back by committee thing with, getting McKinnon 5 to 10 touches a game or whatever.
Yeah. A lot of people that can be the thunder to McKinnon's lightning, and I think that's how all these other teams have been doing it. It's time to wake up and enter this decade.
For sure. And speaking of the new decade and the new generation of football players, we have about, I say, 10 minutes left of the show. We touched on this a few times earlier. What was that?
I can fill that.
Fill what?
The 10 minutes.
I kind of brought up earlier that with the people's negativity or this feeling that the team is either revolting and fleeing, and that we're in the cycle of every 5 years rebuilding and with agonizing defeats or whatever. That came from a tweet and subsequent that was deleted, then a subsequent follow-up on Facebook by Rhett Ellison's dad, who essentially, and I wrote an article about this, it's on purplePTSD.com right now, that just kind of outlines what he said, and just taking it from a position of let's pretend that he's telling the truth or whatever, and just see where this leads.
Thanks.
From a logical perspective, bring it to its logical conclusion, I guess was my point. Basically that there's a toxic leadership problem in Minnesota, and that the Vikings went 11-6, and obviously in 2015 they came into in 2016 they went 5-0. They were unbeatable. They were at their new stadium, and then something happened during the bye week between Zimmer and Spielman that broke things, I think was the verbiage he used, and it like defeated the team to the point where like they like just lost their morale, and then combine that with like these extremely physical practices that wear down the team, and that I think he was saying that was the reason that the offensive line got injured, and the fact that the team also doesn't like how Spielman talks about them specifically in the media, with an example being, I think, maybe not from Ricky Ellison, which is his name, of course, that Anthony Barr was upset that Zimmer had implied he was coasting in the media, which is like, okay, isn't that true? But I guess the point is we talked about this off the air, so I think, Joe, you can go first and kind of talk about what your thoughts are on just the whole thing,
Doesn't pass the smell test for me. I don't, when you say the hard practices from Zimmer, I think that was also the week that he had his first eye surgery, so he could only see half the field, and I think he was thinking he needed to see more. But I'm just kidding. I'm confused at where this comes from. It sounds like it's coming from the old man. I mean, you almost got to take it with a grain of salt, like you do Peterson's dad. When he starts tweeting about Adrian, he doesn't always have all his facts straight.
And the spelling was all messed up. Like the grain of salt he was using was after taking a shot at tequila.
That's right.
Or before.
I can't see Rhett Ellison complaining about practice. Maybe toxic leadership. Maybe Zimmer isn't. It's come out that Zimmer has responded by saying he could do things better. He's been asking his players. They came in and talked to him at the end of the year. How can I do this? And a bunch of them came in and sat down and talked to him. So there is something to that. But as far as practicing are too hard. I mean, Brent Lieber came out and tweeted. He says, what's wrong with these guys? The CBA, eliminates 2 a days and tackling on so many other days, and all of a sudden they can't handle the practice. And that's Rhett Ellison was a beast when he was drafted for this team. I remember on draft night we were interviewing him on the phone, and he was in tears because he didn't know that he would even get drafted, and so happy to be in the league. And I saw him for the first 3 years after most practices pounding blocking sleds, pounding it while we're standing around interviewing everybody else, and he's sitting there. You want to go to him? I say, I can't hear what this guy's saying on my tape recorder because you're pounding the sled so hard. But he
was imagining it was his dad.
He's not come out and saying, he's a really quiet guy, because after he'd done hitting the sled, he'd say, I got to go in and go to a meeting. He never talked to. He didn't like it that much. But so it just seems weird. And a year ago, Ricky Ellison said that his kid wasn't going to re-sign with the Vikings after his devastating knee injury. I think it was. He had the same injury as Greg, the receiver. What's that when you're?
Yeah, Greg Childs.
Yes, he had that same injury, and he came back from it. You wondered if he came back, and he came back, and they only signed him to a 1-year contract because you want to figure out how it works, and they did. And he comes back, and this comes out. I'm surprised, but I don't think it's true. I think it's the old man popping off, and he started, he pulled it back after he did it, and I think he's getting more than he bargained for. So I don't know.
Well, there's a couple details I want to offer that add a little bit of context to this too. So Ben Lieber came out basically in defense of the team. Jerome Felton, a player who played under Zimmer for 1 season 2 years ago, replied to that tweet, showering Zimmer in love. Captain Munnerlyn, who's one of the exits that people were most worried about, especially because there was the DB mutiny and that whole idiotic story. I don't think any player, I can't remember a player who's left with more grace than Captain Munnerlyn. He spent basically the whole afternoon after he signed with Carolina, talking to Vikings media members and saying how grateful he was for the opportunity. And, he tweeted out this nice little image and this whole statement. And that's not something you do when you're leaving a toxic environment. You do things like what Eric Weddle did. That's a toxic environment. Eric Weddle tweeted today about, King Dunlap, the left tackle for the Chargers, just got released. And Eric Weddle tweeted something to the effect of, well, that's how they treat their players. That's not what we're experiencing here. That's what a toxic environment looks like. A toxic environment is one like the Washington Redskins, where they fired their GM on the first day of free agency,
smooth,
because of alcoholism. That's a toxic environment.
Quote unquote.
Yeah, that's true. There's also some like other weird layered issues to that, but that's even more toxic.
Yeah, big time.
Football's a business, and a few players left, and those are business decisions on both parties. I think fans need to stop taking it personally. Like Rhett Ellison wanted $8 million guaranteed dollars with New York. Go get your money, dude. You deserve it. Captain Munnerlyn wanted to go play in Carolina. Go do your thing. I feel like people need to stop taking it personally, like it's an insult to the team every time somebody doesn't rush over to sign with us.
Yes, they weren't going to pay Ellison that kind of money.
No way.
With David Morgan coming up behind him.
Exactly.
And there's not 2 to 3 years of Zimmer love by this entire team that it suddenly turns toxic when he makes a mistake.
Yeah.
It's I agree with you.
No,
I can understand an idea of a locker room being frustrated when you're losing. That happens. There are some players who don't like getting yelled at. That's part of their style. This is Zimmer's style, and that's all to be expected. I don't think it makes anything toxic. I don't think it means anything that Zimmer isn't an adequate coach or anything like that at all.
Totally, and Zimmer came up under Parcells, who I think famously was calling one of his players, he would refer to him as a girl, like in the media, for a long time, and then he felt bad about that and ended up calling the guy a winner. I forget his name, something Terry.
Of course, the Terry on the Cowboys.
But I think again, since I'm in the position of hanging out with people online that are weirdos, the reason that they believe in it. First of all, football, probably more than anything in the United States, takes advantage of tribalism and like how it's ingrained in us because we used to hunt mammoths together, and people do take the Vikings as such a personal thing. But they look at how the season fell apart, and we've said this pretty much on every show that people need to find someone to blame when they have negative emotions. And as fans, they say, well, it makes sense. Something happened during the bye. We were bad after the bye. Norv Turner quit. But it took him a month from whatever the incident was during the bye. And honestly, the only thing I can think of that happened around the bye was when Zimmer reportedly killed all of those teddy bears. So I'm thinking maybe that's what broke the team. I don't know. I think people are like fixated on this idea of like, what did he mean by Spielman and Zimmer breaking the morale with some decision? Too, well, I was just going to say real quick that. And then I'm pretty much done with it, but don't you think we would have heard of this as people who cover this pretty much 24 hours a day, that something massive happened during the bye week that broke things, and especially with the amount of players that aren't on the team anymore or just are on the team in general, that something would have leaked
If we heard
out.
about the DB mutiny with the intensity that we did, we would have heard about something else like that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, I like I said in my article, it's more of like, let's see if there's any logic to this, and basically there isn't. The reason that the team fell apart is because the injuries were overwhelming and the defense was on the field all the time. That's
there was a schism between Zimmer and Turner to some degree, and I read somewhere today that Ricky Ellison's was affiliated with Turner at the Chargers or something. He was his coach or something like that,
okay.
and so there might
play.
Yeah,
there might be some.
He's a bitch.
That's what's funny, that he played in the old school and he thinks the practices are too hard now. Like, that's just a disconnect to me.
Well, he's getting that from somewhere. I don't know where he's getting that, but that is silly. So there could be something there. And we can't ignore the fact that Zimmer and Turner had a falling out. To some degree. The guy just up and quit in the middle of the season because either they weren't going to run his offense anymore or whatever the reason was.
Do you think that the offense was upset about that, though? Like, I don't remember hearing, like, a bunch of players being like, I miss Uncle Norv. It seemed
I'm not saying
No, I'm just saying
Let's win this one for Norv, guys.
Yeah, that was implied by what he was saying.
That's fine, but you can say that. But this was still an unprecedented thing. You don't hear about that. That just doesn't happen. Well, yeah. I'm just going to quit that.
Especially a guy like Norv, especially, who's been in the league for so long. Yeah.
So, there was something there.
There is.
One more detail. Ricky Ellison, apparently there was a story that Paul Allen mentioned. I didn't hear it, but I heard about it mentioned on Fan of Ricky Ellison essentially having a confrontation with Paul Allen that amounted to, you never played football and therefore have no business calling it.
Yep.
So that's the perspective that we're looking at here. I think this dude's just batshit and a crazy sports dad that we all dealt with, when we were little kids. There was always that one kid whose dad was like yelling at him, and it's like, he's 6. What is happening? Ricky Ellison is just that dude, and also CTE's a bitch.
We had a mom when I played hockey growing up that used to yell at my partner, and I played defense. Whenever like a goal would be scored against us, we would just hear "You're walking." Like she kept threatening that he had to walk home from like Coon Rapids. My dad still brings that up to this day. You're walking. Yeah, he does seem like the type of guy that would get arrested for like punching a referee at a hockey game or something. Which to me, it's like when you're a guy like Rhett Ellison who's not a superstar. I mean, at some point, what team's going to be like, hey, remember that blocking tight end whose dad runs his mouth about former employers on social media? Let's give that guy a contract. Like, it's just it doesn't look good for Ellison, especially as a guy who like a lot of fans really looked up to as like a blue class.
Blue collar.
Blue collar. Sorry, I've been up for 3 days straight. Yeah, I mean, I guess I was just gonna say, like Joe said, there is not a schism, but maybe Zimmer's not the perfect coach that a lot of us thought he was, or the team doesn't love him like as much as a lot of people thought that they did. But Zimmer had a good quote that I saw that he talked to Bill Parcells like a week or two ago, and he was talking to Parcells about like the amount of coaches that get fired after 2 years and how he feels that he's still not a complete head coach, and he has so much to learn that it's not really. After 2 years, the guy doesn't have enough to show to get fired or analyzed as a coach as a whole. So his point was that he's not perfect. He wants to learn. Obviously, like Joe said, he's had players come in, and Chad Green was a part of that. On things that they didn't like, or how communication how they can improve and stuff. But I don't think that the way the team's in shambles and that we're in rebuild mode. Like the crux of it was, what free agent would come here when the team is yet again rebuilding? Like, how did we go from being an offensive line away from being a contender last Wednesday to all of a sudden being rebuilt by Monday?
Narratives are a fickle thing. Can I break some news to you guys real quick? Something just broke.
Just wait. Hold on 1 second. I just wanted to say, as a reporter, it's you certainly wanted to hear Zimmer say that, calling out what's the linebacker's name? Anthony Barr. But when we heard it, we kind of sat back and thought, oh my goodness, what's he doing? One of your best players, he's kind of calling him out. So yeah, that's I think that's a lesson learned for him, for Zimmer. But all right,
I think we got the free agents we wanted to get. Cordero Patterson returned to the Raiders facility, and they're closing in on a deal.
What? CP?
That actually is a great fit. Can you imagine what Derek Carr can do with that field position?
Oh man, and him playing with what's his face?
Probably won't dominate the they've got Coop and Crabtree, so they're not doing this because they like desperately need a wide receiver. They have another guy on their team that had a pretty good year behind those two. So he's a special teamer, but that's a good special teamer to go get.
Yeah, he seemed like always seemed like maybe 10 years ago, I'm thinking when Al Davis was still alive and creeping everybody out with his face, but he always seemed like a Raiders type of guy. Yeah, man. Patterson had like a cryptic tweet the other day of like his feet that said like, "Don't take it personal, it's just business," and people interpreted that as him wanting to leave, but it seemed like he was saying on social media that he wanted to come back. But
he Snapchatted it like a whole flurry of Snapchats over just black that just said things, and he was basically like, "Man, I want to come back. I would love to come back, but it's a business. Help me out, Rick." And then Vikings Twitter collectively tried to get #BringFlashHome trending and failed.
That's because I wasn't involved. But I think the point of this is, with Patterson leaving, that just points to the fact that Treadwell is a disaster. I'm kidding. But yeah, with that, I think we kind of hit our limit on time because apparently we have to watch how long we talk. Otherwise, I can't upload these to the internet. So, with that, is there anything that you guys kind of wanted to say before we signed off until some random day next week?
Listen to the Infinite Monkeys podcast.
Yeah.
I talked about why teams don't ever trade.
Yes. Spoiler alert.
Which is weird.
Yeah,
because trade is like a good thing, and why don't it's a good thing in every other thing.
Yep.
Including other sports. Why don't NFL teams do it?
And it seems like you don't have to give up a lot to get established players a lot of the time. You can get like a decent guy for a 5th round pick or whatever. I've always wondered that too, so I'm going to check that show out later.
And the Russians is a ruse.
For who? The Ukrainians?
For me. I wasn't involved with the Russians. It's a ruse.
Where were you? We're still trying to figure out where Joe was last week.
And can't tell you.
I think Joe's still trying to figure out where Joe was last week.
I think you're going to have to convene a congressional investigation before you find that out.
Well, with that, we will see you next week from Washington, D.C., apparently. Check out our site on Facebook, on Twitter. It's just /purplePTSD. Or go to Google News and just type in any amount of keywords, and we're on there now. So check us out next week. We will have a special guest. We will delve into the draft and have obviously a better picture on where the Vikings are with the free agents they signed, and have a clearer picture of what the draft's going to look like or what the needs might be anyway. But with that, thanks for listening, and this has been the Purple Journal Podcast.